Welcome to the Insum Insider.
Welcome to the Inside. This is the Insum Insider, your source for Oracle Apex tips, techniques, methodologies, and really wherever that discussion takes us. I'm your host, Monty, coming to you from soggy Houston, Texas. And with me today is my good friend and member of the Insum family, Michelle Scamini. Hello, Michelle.
Hi, Monty.
At the helm, keeping us on time and task, our producer, French Canadian Mark Rule.
Hi, Monty. I'm Michelle. Hi, Francis. Welcome, everyone.
It's Thursday, June 25th, episode 10. And thank you for spending a piece of your afternoon with us. We're coming to you today through the miracle of Zoom teleconferencing. Michelle, I guess there were times we thought this day would never arrive. It's been a long journey. We've had a blast putting this on. We've learned a lot about Apex, an awful lot about putting on live streams, and it's been fun. And I also want to recognize Francis. Francis was pretty instrumental in this whole idea of putting on these live streams. So Francis, thank you for joining us here in our 10th episode. Kind of culminates everything, but it's been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of work, but it's been a lot of fun, guys.
Yeah. So Monty, you say we've learned a lot about Apex, which is true. But I have to say, I've also learned a lot about my Insum coworkers, and I think for me personally, that's been part of the best part of this whole experience. And I did put a little something together for you. I was hoping you would let me share something. I have a little surprise for you.
For me?
Yes.
I didn't bring you anything.
That's all right. Here we go.
Bienvenido al Insum Insider. Bienvenido al Insum Insider.
Muchas gracias, Monty. Oye, Guillermo, el español de Monty ha mejorado bastante, ¿cierto? 3 sesiones, pero...
Sí, fantástico, solo que yo pensaba que era francés, pero
sí, bueno.
Sí, si tú dices que es español, está bien.
Qué bueno estar con ustedes el día de hoy.
Your afternoon with us. We're coming to you from through the miracle of Zoom, whether you need video conferencing, web conferencing, webinars, screen sharing, or chat. Zoom is rated #1 in customer satisfaction according to an OKTA 2020 report. Michelle, after delivering a product spot like that, I should ask for compensation, don't you think?
Absolutely. I don't know where that came from, but I hope Zoom will be calling.
How's the quarantine treating you? It's actually not bad. It's not perfect, but it's much improved. Actually, I used the Panasonic J12.
You aren't going to do another product placement. What are you doing?
You knew there was going to be a product placement here with 8 blade attachments, 5,600 RPMs, available at Walgreens and CVS near you. Stop. Please make it stop.
It's stop. I had so much fun putting that together, Monty, and I just wanted to thank you for the laugh. You've kept me on my toes. Seems like you had a surprise for me every episode, so I want to thank you for that. And I know our friends on L Insider really enjoyed your participation. You're introducing the show in Spanish every week, so despite the awkward Spanish, and next time we'll have to have you on the French side as well.
Yeah, I was going to say that. Francis never invited me to speak to announce the French sessions.
Well, your French sounds a bit like Spanish to me.
That's fair enough. That's fair enough. Well, thanks again, Francis, for kind of coming up with the idea. Thank you, Michelle, for running with it. And
well, before we go further, I just want to thank you both. Also, you did a great job. I think this is part of our values, like teamwork and having fun and sharing our knowledge. So that's really who we are at Insum, and it's really the inside of Insum, the Insum Insider. And I feel like it was at the end, it was really like a race. So I decided to put my Oracle racing team, because I feel like I'm part of the Oracle racing team now. So congrats to both of you. You did great. And I think it's also great that we started some Spanish and French sessions also.
Yeah. It's definitely something we want to keep going. That was a great thing to do as well.
Yeah, we'll have We'll have more information there near the end of the broadcast about where we're going to take this. We're going to wrap this up, this grand experiment, with our 10th episode here with 10 parting gifts, 10 Apex tips from our Insum experts to help you get more out of your Apex investment. Gentlemen, go ahead and fire up your cameras. Let's get this, gentlemen, start your engines kind of thing here. Now, it's important to remember these aren't in any particular order. For example, we started. As far as Martin knows, these are not in any particular order. We have Martin in at number 10. He's extremely pressed for time. We're lucky to have him in. So go ahead, Michelle. Let's play.
Number 10.
Oh boy, that's so professional. Martin is going to join us and provide his tip where he's going to discuss build options. Please, Martin, take it away.
All right, in the least favorite child position, number 10. I'm going to start things off. So what I'm going to
you have, sorry.
So I'm actually going to show a twofer, and Mark's going to post things, I guess, in the discussion of links for more information on both of what I'm about to show you.
Will do.
So the case that a lot of people have sometimes is when they're developing their Apex applications in development, they add things in that can help them. They can be a report, it can be an extra page item, it can be just even a to-do, I'm here sort of thing. But you never want those to go into production. So what they do is they add them in, then before release, they take them out, and then they add them in, and it's this big mess. But sometimes you have those things that you want to keep in forever. For instance, when you have a modal window, one of the things that sucks is if you make a change and you want to reload it, you usually either have to close the modal and reopen it, or you have to right click, scroll down this frame, and I don't even know, reload frame, right? When you have to do that over and over and over again, it gets very tiresome. So I've got this button here called reload modal. And that's in how to actually do this in your modal. Mark's gonna post that link. And I've got this button here, and so we'll actually reload the modal. So let's say I want to just change street address to address. I'll just change this word to address and save it. And instead of closing the modal, reopening, I can just click this button and it will reload the modal. Can be a huge time saver when you have to do a lot of updates on modals. Now, the thing is, if I go to production, I don't want to see this button. This is only for developers, right? It's there to help us. So instead of constantly having to remember to change that to never, or again, delete it, there's something called build options in Apex. So if you go into shared components and build options, and what that allows you to do is, they call it include or exclude. You can think of it, I don't like those words because a lot of people get confused with it as to whether it's actually included in the file export or not. It's always there. It's whether it's turned on or turned off. I like those words better because it's really what's happening. So I'm going to create this build option called dev only. And I usually like that because that's very obvious to everyone, saying this is only for developers. And right now I'm going to include it. And when I export the application, I exclude it. Again, don't think of these as include and exclude. Think of as turn on and turn off. And so what I'm going to do now is go back to, I'm actually going to go onto page 0 because that's where this thing is. So I'm going to go to, I should have done that. I'm going to go to page 0, and on that whole dialog here, if you go into build options, I'm going to choose dev only. And what that's saying is, again, if this flag is on or off, show or don't show that button. So I'm going to reload and nothing happened. Now, if I go back into build options, I can turn it off just by saying status of exclude. So if I refresh this, that button will disappear. So this is different than a regular condition because you can put this on a lot of different things on your Apex application. And time's really short here, but the logic is that when you export it and now import it into a new workspace, i.e. in a test or prod instance, by default, those things will not be turned on, they'll be turned off. And by that, I mean it will have the exclude option. So that's it. That's my quick tip.
Well, Martin, thank you for that tip. And thank you for delivering. You kind of kicked off this whole thing with you and Jorge having a session on productivity tools. So we really appreciate that.
No problem.
Number 9.
Number 9 comes to us from Insum's own Neil Fernandez. Neil, what do you have for us?
How's it going, Monty? So today I have one quick tip. I'm going to focus on efficiency. So trying to get you to stop clicking around as much and use the keyboard to navigate Apex. So since Apex 18, they introduced Spotlight Search, and I didn't start using it until recently. So to get Spotlight Search up, you can click up here, but with your keyboard, there's a shortcut. It's Control and quote, and you get it up. And what's nice about Spotlight Search is it could really stop you from having to click anywhere. You can navigate, it's all context-based. So I'm gonna start by going to my application that I wanna bring up. So I have an application and it's called Apex 20 Multi-Line. So I click on it. And then from here, I'm gonna just Control quote again. And I wanna go to the home page. I type in the home page and it looks everywhere for the word home. It might be a page. It doesn't look down at the page level. It's looking like shared components, possibly utilities. And here's my page. Once you're on a page, you bring up the Spotlight Search. It'll search the context of the page. So I have on here a process called multi-line. And you see that right here denoted by process multi-line. And then I also have add multiple users. This is from another application. And at the very bottom, there's 4 hotkeys that you can use. Control 1 will search your workspace for that word. Control 2 will search all applications for that word. Control 3 will search only this application for that word. And Control 4 will search just this page, which essentially is what it's doing already. So I click on it, it brings me there. And a neat thing is, if you want to navigate to shared components, you don't have to come up here and click. You just bring up the Spotlight Search, type shared, we're in shared components. I want to work with lists. I bring it up, type in list, navigation, list details, navigation. Nope, I want shared components lists. There we go. And I want to look at the unused list specifically. Unused, it'll bring me right there to that tab. And essentially, I don't have to touch my mouse to jump around anymore. So that is to showcase the power of the Spotlight Search. And I'm not going to dig into anything else because that's enough in itself. So
well,
that is my quick tip.
That was great. And I wanted to also thank you for, I know you were with Vincent Morneau delivering a session on repositories and version control. And we really enjoyed that session. You guys also talked about APEXCL. Is that, Michelle, is that still available? The link still available there in the chat?
It is. And as you know, talking about quick tips and top tips, I think we would definitely say that that whole session was a great tip to use version control, obviously, but also APEXCL if you're interested in doing code review of your Apex application. So that is still free until October. So we invite you all to check it out.
And that's something that comes up a lot. People asking about how to do version control and with their Apex applications. So yeah, very timely stuff, a great session, and we can provide you a killer deal all the way through October on APEXCL. Next up is someone named Michelle Scamini, who's going to talk to us about quick SQL.
Obviously is not managing this multitasking thing very well with the audio. Neil actually stole a bit of my thunder because I was going to cover a bit of Spotlight Search, but I do have more than just Spotlight Search to share. So let me just grab my screen. Can you guys see my Apex builder here?
We can.
Okay, so I wanted to revisit something that Anton touched on in episode 8 when he did his crazy 0 to app in 45 minutes, which I think was a fantastic testament to what we can do with Apex. But quick SQL is something that actually I hadn't used much before, and it made me realize how great it was. But he glossed over some of the things that I think are worth pointing out. So I'm going to use the Spotlight search to get to quick SQL very quickly. Anton, did you know you could do that? Use the Spotlight search just to get to it so quickly?
You know, I know you can, but I haven't ingrained it into the muscle memory yet to do it.
So I'm never going to go through those menus anymore. I'm definitely going to be using Spotlight search. And what I loved when I was looking at Spotlight search is if you're in a busy page and you've got a ton going on, a lot of buttons, a lot of processes, and you use the Spotlight, you can just search and jump straight to a specific component on the page. So I think the Spotlight search is fantastic. Okay, so quick SQL. I had a need not too long ago in an application that we do for kids to generate random usernames. So for all sorts of reasons, COPPA compliance, etc., we can't have kids signing on either with their email addresses or names. So we were coming up with a way where we could create random usernames for them by kind of combining, doing word combinations. So wanted to create a table of, let's call it random usernames with, let's say, column 1, maybe just 10 characters, column 2, 10 characters, column 3, 10 characters. Now, this I love because coming up with, I'm in the wrong language here, coming up with a ton of sample data in a table like this to sort of be able to randomize usernames, just being able to do an insert of, say, 50 rows, and then taking a look at having all of this data populate, I think is fantastic. So we have all of these records, we can generate our random usernames. One thing, Anton, you talked about, you had all of these settings that you talked about, but you were doing them, kind of typing them into this quick SQL window over here. I did want to point out that you can do it declaratively over here with the settings, just to see all of the options. So if you want to create all of your tables with a certain prefix, you know the syntax because you're in here all the time, but people that don't know all the syntax and all of the options, you've got it over here in this sort of declarative settings box.
I didn't know you could do that. I didn't know that button.
You were presenting it. I'm like, yeah, but what if you don't know what all of those settings are? It's quite nice. So I did want to point out that you've got all of the settings here declaratively in this little box. You did talk about some of them, but the audit columns, so automatically creating your created by, updated by columns. This history table, we talked about it on one of our projects recently. If you turn the history table on, it automatically creates triggers on your tables and logs all of your old values, new values into a history table. So you don't have to, I have a whole blog post about how to generate all of this auditing on your data and how you can regenerate the triggers. Right now, you can just come in here and click history table on, and that, anyway, so there's some great settings here that you can do declaratively. So I just thought that it was worth showing these declarative settings that if you don't know about it, you might gloss over them. And do take a look at, I think I've got a slow internet connection here. I'll just click out of here, but the help in here is fantastic. It's right here, the different data types, your table directives, column directives. So if you forget what the comments are, what the commands are, it's all in here. So it's all right, accessible. So take a look at the help, take a look at the settings, which I think are really helpful. And that was my quick tip.
Thank you, Michelle. Now, I know you never had your own session. We had a couple of sessions that you were going to headline, but we just simply ran out of calendar. So we may have you headline.
And now I can't tell you how glad I am that I never had to, because I suddenly got super nervous. I'm like, I can chat with you, I can control the audio sort of, but ask me to present all of a sudden, I'm like, but check out Quick Sequel.
You did fine. You did fine. All right, moving right on. Number 7 it is. We're going to be joined by Insum's own Angel Flores, where he's going to talk about Chrome extensions. Go ahead, Angel.
Hello, guys. Yes, today I'm going to show you a little Chrome extensions that I use every day. Let me know. You see my screen?
Yes, we do.
Yes. We see it.
The first Chrome extension that I want to show you is the Apex Pro that is developed for Insum. This has a nice tools because we can, as you say, it has some autocomplete for PL/SQL code. Another enhancement that it highlight the change properties. It's the value by default is changed. You can see when the value was changed. Another interesting is you can filter the properties. So in the type of the some items, you can just write, for example, D in this case in the image. So you can display the types when they contains the letter D. And it has more interesting tooltips. So the next one extension that I want to show you is the APEXperts Designer tab look. It has a nice way to find the local variables. You just need to right click, and then you can find the easy way to get the variables on your page. So as you see on the image, you can get the value and also the value using JavaScript code. Another interesting thing for this is you can use an Apex variables like global variables or Apex users, Apex session, Apex NLS date format. Just with one click, you can have access to that variable. You don't need to remember the structure or something like that. No? The next extension that is, I love it, it's validate.js, the Smart Solutions Apex plugin. It validates, as the number says, some code in JavaScript. It also has a functionality for the beauty code. You say you can paste a plenty code like the before, and after you can just formatting that code using just one click. And also it has a code mirror mode when you can write in a code editor text on the Apex. So you can change saying, okay, I want to display it on CSS, JS, HTML, PL/SQL. That's it on my side. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And Anil did multiple sessions for us on L Insider. And you make Spanish look easy, by the way. So I appreciate you involving yourself on L Insider. And I think there was 2 sessions you worked on. One of them was the Jet, and being able to add stunning visualizations into your Apex app using Oracle Jet. And the other one was on, was it on productivity?
Yes.
I thought so.
Yep.
Thought so. Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Number 6.
Number 6 it is. And with number 6, I'm joined by my good friend, Kenny Kalina. Kenny, what do you have for us?
Thank you, Monty. I would like to share with you a solution I just found out, and there is something that took me some time to get it working, but it was really something really easy to do. Let me know if you can see my screen, please. Okay, let's get started. I'm talking about context menu, right? Using the right click in any field. So something like this. Usually when we have a page and we just right click in a field, it just bring it up the context menu by default of the browser. So if we want to personalize this, I would like to just share with you 4 simple steps to do it. So let's get it on. First of all, this context menu is going to be based in a list. So let's go to the shared components and create quick links here. So from scratch, let's call it, I don't know, simple pop-up list. And we're going to add just 3 options, no? Option 1, option 2, and option 3. Let's, as an action, I'm just going to do an alert. But certainly you can just personalize your action as you wish. Okay, this is our first step, quick and easy. Let's go to our second step, is create a region in the page where you want to add this context menu. So let's go to our page and let's create really quick a region. Here we're going to call it pop-up region. It has to be a region type list, and then we want to attach it the list we just created in the shared components. Okay. Another important thing here is we have to change the template and use inline dialog. And finally, and not least important, for this second step is to add an static ID. We're going to add this pop-up menu region. Let's go with our third step, is just to change the attribute of the region. The list template has to be set in menu pop-up. Third step done. And for our fourth step, we just create the event, right-click event. We go to at the page level. We're going to just create a piece of code when page load. We have it here. I'm using this selector just to specify we're going to use all the input items in the page, but not the buttons. Okay, and we're using this context menu to define the right-click event. We have 2 lines here. The first one is just to avoid our usual context menus appears. Okay, and the second one is just to pop up our list as a context menu, as a context menu. So we're using here our the static ID we define, added in the suffix underscore menu, and we just use this menu toggle to pop up. So let's see it working. I'm going to go here. We refresh the page. It would be nicer. I could do something like Martin de Souza before, just to avoid to refresh everything. And if we click here, we can see our options. So there is something I consider really nice, and it's really simple it's incredible. Once you know how to do it, it just saves it lots of time. So that's my quick tip, Monty. Thank you.
Thank you, Kenny. Kenny's session was on going from forms to Apex. He delivered it as part of the L Insider. and it was a very well attended, very interesting session he did with Egle. That session, along with all the sessions that we're referencing today, are available on the Insum Insider website. So if you want to go back and you want to watch these sessions in their entirety, you're free to do so.
Number 5.
Number 5 comes to us from the face that runs the place. Francis Mignot is going to, what do you have for us, Francis?
All right, so I'm going to talk a bit more about the database part, and maybe for our friend, DBA friends, but also that's a question I get a lot. So as you probably know, when Apex runs, it uses a pool of connections. So what that does is when what you see here in the middle is that when you call for a page or you're doing something in Apex, it really goes through this pool of connection. It generates your page and it brings it back to your browser, and then it releases those connections. The problem with that is that as a DBA, or when you're looking in your $$ session views, it's hard to monitor and find out what's going on. So you might see, you know, in your database, a database session, I'm not talking about Apex sessions, but database session, going like crazy, or something is running, you don't know what's going on, and you say, okay, Apex is slow, I don't know what's going on. So there's a way of knowing exactly what's going on with those different connections, those different Apex public users. Let me switch. So there's a instrumentation that's been built into Apex since day one. And what they did is that when an Apex page run, those values, the module, client info, and client identifier are populated with some great information there. So now, instead of just looking at the username and then seeing a bunch of Apex public user sessions, you can go a bit deeper and look at, for example, in the module part, you'll see the database user being used. You see the Apex application and the page ID. So right there, you can say, okay, there's a problem with this page, this application, this database user, but you also get in the client info the workspace ID, which could be useful. And if you go on the client ID, then you get to see the session ID also. So a lot of great information already there for you. And that, again, that's a question I get a lot. You know, when you look at the database, you see the database sessions, you can get all of this information. Once you get that, of course, you can go a bit deeper again and use the workspace activity log, and you'll get tons of information there also. So you can get the IP address, you can get, you know, a bunch of different things. So that's my tip of the day. If you're looking at the database and seeing an Apex session going wild, then you can go deeper and find out what's going on really, and call the appropriate person to fix these things up.
Thank you. Thank you, Francis. Thank you. And I know I mentioned it at the top of the show, but I really want to thank you again for coming up with the idea for us to do these Insum Insiders. So I appreciate you very much. So thank you again, Francis.
My pleasure.
Number 4.
Number 4 comes to us from the Pacific Northwest. Mr. Adrian Ping has a tip for us. Adrian, take it away.
Thanks, Monty. So this tip kind of came to me recently because I was involved in a project where we had to make sure that the Apex application that we were building met the web accessibility standards. And it's one of those things I think as a developer, we don't really think about when we start. And most of the time, at least for a large majority of us, we don't have those problems, right? And it's sometimes difficult to step into other people's shoes, but if you start using tools to kind of analyze your Apex applications, you start to see lots of issues that kind of show up that you typically wouldn't worry about. And I'm just going to quickly show you some of the tools that I've been kind of using recently. And so let's say, oops. Okay, So here's the website, and I actually have two plugins that I've installed. So that there's the Wave extension, which kind of lets you quickly, it'll screen your application for issues like, missing alternative text. And here's one where basically I had images that didn't have your alt or your title attribute. You can also use another tool, and this is a little bit clumsy I found because it kind of overlays everything on your page. There's actually another tool which if you did an inspect, it's called X, and X has a paid version. I'm actually using a free because I'm cheap. And I'm just going to click on the Analyze button. And it'll do basically about the same as what Wave does, less visual interruptions. But it does kind of list all the issues that I have. And you can even navigate between any of them if, let's say, this kind of hits more than one. It also lets you kind of highlight the areas that it's at fault. So it's just this little icon that's missing that title. You can even inspect that node, and it just brings you to the elements of that's causing the problems. But if you're not a huge fan of installing all these extensions, and if you're a Chrome fan, well, I just discovered this morning that you can use something called Lighthouse. Lighthouse actually does a lot more than just accessibility testing. It also looks at performance and some of the other stuff that commonly have to pay attention to when building up web applications. So like X, you would do something like generate the report. It run through your application, and then again list out all the stuff that's gone wrong, and it just tells you about the same. Having used these three tools, I'd say X is still my favorite, and with that I would end.
Thank you very much, Adrian.
Can I just ask Adrian just quickly? Would you
Sure.
Sure. recommend doing this? Presumably, you're not going to develop this and then run this all at the end. Is this something that you just do iteratively throughout your development process? Yeah.
And thanks for reminding me, Michelle, because actually that's the real tip, right? It's kind of like security. You don't think about this as an afterthought. One of the biggest challenges I found was that because I'm doing this after the application has been built, I'm actually having to do more work now at trying to meet deadlines, and it just gets very cumbersome. When if we had the same philosophy about test-driven development, where you design for accessibility first, then everything you kind of do goes, you build that thought. So if I'm putting this color, white on light blue, is that enough color contrast for somebody who has difficulty looking at things visually, right? And then you start, and in Theme Roller, we have those little signals that tells you, where you're kind of failing. But I don't think, at least for myself, I really pay attention to it as much as a developer, and I really should. So I'm learning it the hard way, and I hope you won't have to.
Yeah.
Thank you, Adrian, and thank you, Michelle, for the clarification. The session that Adrian and Luc Demanche gave during the Insum Insider was not your normal Apex session. It was on getting dirty with the Oracle Cloud, and I found it to be one of my favorites. It was if you're not taking advantage of the free autonomous database, it's something that you should definitely look into. And we're proud to have Adrian, Luke, and Daniel to be Oracle Cloud certified at this moment. So thank you very much, Adrian. Certainly appreciate your involvement in the session and your involvement today.
You're welcome. And Monty,
I
wouldn't.
Go ahead, Adrian.
I'll include the links in the show notes.
Yeah, please do. Please do. That is number 4. We're going to number 3 from the Boston area. We're going to be joined by Anton Nielsen. Anton, what tip do you have for us?
Well, I do everything these days with a timer, so I'm going to click start now, and we're going to get going on this. I've ruined 2 alarm clocks in the shower already, but here we go. So we got 5 minutes, right? That's what we said.
That's fine.
3 minutes.
Oh, 3 minutes. Oh gosh, I should reset my timer. Okay, 3 minutes. Well, so I'm going to hold off on saying what my tip is until I show a little bit of what made me think about it. One of the things that we wanted to be able to do was be able to pop terms and conditions if those terms and conditions change. And that essentially means being able to pop a modal window, a modal page automatically. Most of the time we go to a page and the modal page doesn't automatically show on top. So the ability to pop a modal page. And there are lots of scenarios you might want to do it, but in our case, it was to be able to do terms and conditions. So I've got this, it automatically pops. And then if I click I accept, it no longer pops. So if I go to another page, it doesn't pop anymore. The other thing that I did when I was doing this was I decided not to change my data model at all. I wasn't going to add any new things in my database, but obviously I need to store something to know something about this user. So the first thing I did was I created a setting in application settings to say, this is the required version. If you don't have version 3, you need to pop that window. But I also needed a way to say, well, what version have they accepted? So to determine what version they had accepted, I created a preference. And the preference, if I go to the right page here, I should have used my spotlight search here, but let me jump here. Here in the preference, I've got this set preference. And what the preference does is when you click that accept button, it says, okay, Apex util set preference, the terms version that I accepted, and I'm going to set it in the version that is the setting. So I've got this API, Apex util set preference, and I've got this Apex app setting get value. So that's how I manage without changing my data model at all to use the Apex data model. And then the main thing that I do after that is I come over and in my shared components, I have an application item, I'm in a gpop URL, and all gpop URL is it holds the JavaScript that is used to navigate to the pop-up window. And I've got a little computation here, and that, I'm sorry, I've got a process, not a computation. And that process utilizes a few little APIs. But the main one here is this apex page.get URL. So I just check to see, is there preference that they currently have? Does the preference equal the setting? And if the preference doesn't equal the setting, then I pop the URL. And then I created on page 0 a very, very quick dynamic action. And so I've just got a dynamic action here. Well, that is my pop URL. And all it has in that dynamic action is the results of the apex page.get URL. That's it. That's there's actually no JavaScript that I wrote at all. It's just that API. So here's my tip. My tip is I used 3 APIs to do this. I didn't write any code myself. And so my real tip is, how do you know about the APIs? You click the question mark, you go to documentation, and you hit browse and the Apex API reference. If you do it the way I just did it, if you go in your builder, you click the question mark, you go to the documentation, you get the documentation for the version of Apex that you're running, and you've got all of these utilities at your fingertips, and they do so much. So my tip is RTFM.
Well, that's always a good tip. That tip is timeless. Now, when you make these API calls,
go ahead.
when you make these API calls, have you had experience with some of these things being deprecated over time, or if you're sticking to the Oracle Apex APIs, they've been fairly stable?
They've been really, really stable. The Apex team does a great job at not deprecating them. You know, if they do, they give you plenty of time to get past it. We've talked about a couple of them recently where the community pushed back on one recently. The Apex item API was going to be deprecated. Pushback happened and the Apex team listened and they backed off on that. So I would use these APIs with abandon.
Great, great. And you know, Anton, again, thanks for the tip. Much has been made of your session that you did with Hayden on 0 to app in 45 minutes. That was really inspiring, and I know it was a lot of work, but that was probably my favorite session, and I'm gonna say that without reservation, that was really great because it was a lot of everything wrapped up into one little session, one little 45-minute session. So it was great. Thank you for doing that. Like we said during that session.
Yeah, and I would step in as well, be it not just that session, but you participated in a few. You did one on peer code review with Rich, and then another one on EBS. So thank you very much for being such a big part of our Insider.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I really appreciate it. I've enjoyed all the sessions, so really appreciate being part of it. Thanks.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. Number two, we're joined by Jorge Rembles. And Jorge, what tip do you have for us?
Well, my tip segues perfectly after Anton showed how to get to documentation. I'm going to talk about shortcuts. And shortcuts is more about doing something like this. You can go to apex.oracle.com and type shortcuts, and that brings you to this fabulous page full of super useful shortcuts. But here's how I use this. Anton was saying, get to documentation. Well, what version of Apex are you on? Are you on Apex 5.1? I do docs 51, and that pops, sorry, not docs, doc 51. And that brings you to the documentation for Apex 5.1. Come on. Loading. While that keeps on loading, the one I use all the time is actually API. If you want to get to those APIs like Anton was showing, I go to apex.oracle.com/API. That brings you to the latest version of the API's documentations. I also use a lot JS API. That brings you to the JavaScript APIs, where you can go and look at, for example, Apex Server Process, which has a lot of interesting parameters, and I'm always forgetting which ones. Let's go back to the 5.1. Here's the one for 5.1 that loaded. And from here, you can go to the APIs, or you can go to any of the other interesting options. So getting back to the basic one, you go to shortcuts, and there are many things about accessibility, the architecture, blog posts, books, certification, documentation for all the versions of Apex, including Apex 4.2, downloading Apex, and lots of other useful things that even the quick SQL. So I invite you to explore all the shortcuts and use them. I use them every day.
All right, Jorge, I'm going to piggyback a little bit. Can you go down to presentations?
You bet.
Because this is like an honorable mention tip. You know, there's going to be some of you listening to the telecast here, to the broadcast, that are interested in having Apex or pushing Apex within your organization. So if you go to presentations off the shortcuts, at the very top, there's an Oracle Apex overview. There's Oracle Apex 20.1 new features. These are PowerPoints that you can use yourself within your own organization. Rather than having to come up with your own PowerPoint, you can use these. Oracle wants you to use them. They're all professionally done with all the graphics. Yeah, you know, they're accurate and with the new features and the like. So I use these a lot whenever I need to have some updates to my sessions or my PowerPoint. So shortcuts is a great link, And also the one that I use a lot of is for the universal theme. I go to shortcuts and go. Yeah, that's a fantastic one as well.
I actually keep that one open all the time. The universal theme, UT, apexoracle.com/UT. If you don't have the app, this is an app you can install on your own workspace, but if you want to quickly get to it, you get here to examine your components and searching icons. It's one of those things I do all the time.
Yep. Great tip.
Actually,
great tip.
Jorge, do you remember a while ago you put together, I think it was a slide share of sort of Maze Runner,
That's
all
right.
sorts of resources.
That's right.
And then Mark and I kind of built on that and did a post with all sorts of useful resources. And there was a cheat sheet. And so the shortcuts are in there, the universal theme. Monty will have to add in the presentations link, but Mark,
to Maze Runner.
put a link to that blog post that included all of that stuff. That could be helpful.
Yes.
I put in a link to the blog post and the video, as well as the video of Jorge's presentation.
Yes.
Perfect. Jorge, the sound effects, the intro, the outro to the Insum Insider, does that sound all vaguely familiar to you?
I kind of recognize the voice.
Who is the voice?
That's my daughter. She just turned 11, Marina, and shout out to Marina. She's been very happy recording. She recorded the intro and outro in English, in Spanish, and in French. No, she doesn't speak French, but she did a good job.
Excellent job.
Thank you.
She did. So please, from all of us, please thank Marina. She's now a permanent part of the Insider, and it's part of all of our recordings. And her voice is out there.
Yeah, that was great.
Thank you very much.
I love listening to this and the shout out. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jorge.
And
Number one, we don't tell Martin, we did save the best for last. It's the Hudson Hornet. It's Hayden Hudson. Hayden, what do you have for us?
Thank you, Monty. I feel like I've won something. So I'm going to share my screen. So my tip is quite simple, but hopefully as a consequence, it'll be easy for people to remember and act upon. The short of it is when you use level 9 in Apex Debug, it gives you, Apex will print the SQL execution plan for the SQL on your page. So what does that mean? I will build up to it. Essentially, this tip goes out to anyone who has ever tried to debug why their page is slow. I've learned through bitter experience that you should never jump to conclusions as to why your page is running slow. Always run your page in debug mode first before you catch yourself going down rabbit holes, solving problems that aren't actually problems. So debug will always be your answer. And just for the sake of clarity, debug is what you have access to when you find this little debug button here at the bottom of your screen. When you run it, you'll find, so this is the friendly URL, but it's a very similar concept. If it's not the friendly URL, you'll find this little yes up here. As it turns out, debug is more than just a binary. You actually have a range of options. It turns out that the default is actually the equivalent of writing level 4 in your URL like so. There are a number of Apex debug levels. On my screen, I'll just call out that, so number 1 will be the most succinct tracing level, so you'll only get the critical errors, and it goes all the way up to 9, which will be the most granular. And as it happens, and this brings me to my actual tip, if you choose the most granular level, you will get the SQL execution plan for your page. So if I were to switch from level 4 to level 9 in my URL like so, it will run, it'll take a little longer to process because it's printing a lot of stuff to the debug log. And we'll just wait for it to complete. And we can access the debug messages through the view debug button here. And we can see that it took about 5 seconds to load. we enter here and we can search the page for plan. And here we find the execution plan. I don't expect everyone is necessarily an expert in reading these execution plans. It can be quite technical. But even novice SQL writers can get some use out of it, if only by looking at the relative costs of different SQL queries. So the idea is you can, so this is the SQL query on the page as it is. If you're seeking to fine tune the SQL query, you can change the SQL, run the page in debug mode again, and you'll see the relative, how this number changes. So the cost 11 will tell you whether or not you've improved or somehow worsened the performance of that SQL. And also, you may develop some instinct for whether or not you should have nested loops versus hash joins. That could alert you to the fact that perhaps you need to refresh the database stats on the tables that you're querying. As a final thing, I will call out that there are APIs associated with this. Should you need to programmatically set the debug level of your page, there's the APEXdebug PL SQL API. And if you need to do it for someone else, you can, if they give you their session ID, you can set the debug level of their page. And that wraps it up for me.
Well, thank you, Hayden. If we did have an MVP for the Insum Insider, I'm not sure it wouldn't be yourself. You participated on 2 or 3 sessions, and they were all great sessions. So thank you so much for involving yourself in the Insum Insider. One of the reasons that you're batting cleanup for us.
I'm sorry, Monty. I would add that he participated in multiple multilingual sessions.
Indeed.
He did some in French.
And did some in French
Oui, oui.
and English. Oui, oui. But also another reason you're batting cleanup for us is Adrian mentioned how this was the stuff that you were putting. Your tip here was just so instrumental, so critical to development. So we sure appreciate you involving yourself and getting us through these top 10 tips. Thank you, APEXperts. I know I'm going to leave someone out, but I don't intend to do so. We had other people that participated. We had Sylvain, we had Luc Demange, Patrick Monaco, we had Vincent Morneau. If I've left anyone out, you know who you are, and we appreciate you participating in the Insider. I want to thank those of you listening online. Of course, thank you, Michelle and Francis, for allowing us to do this and making this happen every week. Mark Rule, couldn't have done it without you.
Thank you. You guys were excellent hosts. I really appreciate it. It was a great experience. Thank you. And thanks to everyone for all their generosity, everyone that's contributed to the Insider from Insum.
I'm going to step out and declare victory. We did it. It was a scotch ambitious, but we did it. We committed to these 10 episodes, these 75 days, and we followed it through to
Not
the end.
10. Sorry, Monty. I can't let you say 10 episodes. It was 10 weeks. It was 18 episodes.
That's true. That's true. 10 in English, 4 in Spanish, and 4 in French, I think. Wow. Amazing. So those sessions, as we mentioned, they're all available on the Insum Insider website. So go there at your leisure and listen to them time and time again. They're great. I do it all the time, especially the intros. Okay, so where do we go from here? Well, that's going to be the subject of many an internal conversation. What will help is the feedback we receive from you, the Insum Insider attendee. If you like what you've seen these last 75 days, if you've found it helpful, you need to let us know. And as I mentioned, it was a lot of fun, but it was a lot of work. But in business, you follow the demand. So if the demand is there, we will move to satisfy it. We're going to reach out to you in the next couple of weeks and find out if there's additional subjects that you'd like to see us tackle. But the main thing is we want to make sure that what we've done these 75 days has been beneficial to the Apex community. So please let us know. Please have your feedback ready for us. Mark, we need to get everyone back to work. So cue the music. We'll dance on out of here. Thanks again for taking this journey with us. And I hope you've enjoyed spending time on the inside. Thank you now.
You've been listening to the Insum Insider.